Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a geopolitical bombshell that is sending shockwaves from Washington all the way to Copenhagen. We're talking about President Trump's renewed and this time much more forceful push to gain control of Greenland.
All right, let's just start with the statement that set this whole thing on fire. I mean, this wasn't some subtle hint. This was a completely unambiguous declaration, signaling a major escalation in the president's interest in the autonomous Danish territory.
So, how in the world did we get to this point? Well, the president has made it crystal clear he wants U.S. control over Greenland. Now, he's framed it as a proposal, but really, it was delivered with the weight of an ultimatum. And that's raising some pretty urgent questions about how he plans to pull this off against the will of both Greenland and Denmark.
So, what's the official reason for such an unprecedented move? Well, the administration isn't framing this as just a big real estate deal anymore. No, this is being presented as a critical, absolutely non-negotiable issue of national security for the United States. You know, the core argument coming out of the White House is that this is all a preemptive move. The fear is that if the U.S. doesn't secure Greenland, one of our global rivals will. And that would mean them establishing a strategic foothold in the Arctic, a region that's, rapidly opening up because of climate change.
And what's really interesting here is how specific he's being. The president isn't talking about some abstract threat. He is explicitly naming Russia and China as the rivals driving this whole policy. He's framing it as a race for influence in the high north. And listen, this isn't just the president's position. Vice President JD Vance has backed this up, really emphasizing Greenland's vital role in our global missile defense network. He's confirmed that from where the administration sits, hostile powers are already circling, which makes this an urgent matter. And this brings us to the ultimatum itself. President Trump has laid out two very different paths for Greenland and Denmark. The first, he calls the easy way, just make a deal. But the second, much more ominous option, is the hard way. And the details of what that means, well, they've been left deliberately and kind of chillingly vague. So, how did Greenland and Denmark respond to all this? Their reaction was immediate. It was unified and it was completely unambiguous. I mean, there was zero hesitation in their reply to the president. This quote from Greenland's U.S. representative just perfectly captures the feeling. It's a firm defense of their national sovereignty. The message is simple. Their home is not some commodity you can just negotiate over. And it's not just him. Both Greenlandic and Danish officials have repeated this over and over again. They have made it absolutely clear that any discussion about a sale or changing the title to their land is just not an option they're willing to even think about, no matter how much pressure comes from Washington. But the opposition wasn't just coming from overseas. Back here in Washington, the president's proposal was met with what is, frankly, a pretty rare display of bipartisan skepticism. You had key lawmakers from both parties quickly pouring cold water on the whole idea. I mean, after meeting with the Danish and Greenlandic representatives, the top Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, he just put it plainly. He said there is absolutely zero appetite for negotiation from their side, period. And then on the other side of the aisle, his Democratic counterpart, Jeanne Shaheen, she went even further. She basically argued that the entire premise of the president's demand is flawed because the U.S., Denmark, and Greenland are already strong allies. They cooperate all the time, so why create a crisis with a friend? And this right here is a crucial point. Even one of the president's staunchest allies, Republican Speaker Mike Johnson, he completely dismissed the idea of using military force, the so-called hard way. He was emphatic that Congress is just not considering that path at all. So the takeaway here is that this isn't just one or two people speaking out. The opposition is this broad and powerful chorus, right? It includes our international partners, who are also NATO allies, and the bipartisan leadership of the U.S. Congress. But here's the thing. Despite this pretty formidable wall of opposition, both at home and abroad, the White House is not backing down. And this has created a really tense and frankly highly unusual diplomatic standoff with a key European ally. The path forward? It's anything but clear. And if there was any doubt about the administration's resolve, this warning from Vice President Vance just erased it. His advice to European leaders sends a clear signal. This is not a bluff. The White House is dead serious about this course of action, no matter what the diplomatic fallout is. I mean, just look at the events of this past week. You can see how quickly this whole situation has escalated. It went from congressional pushback on Wednesday to the president's direct threat on Friday. So now all eyes are on next week's high-stakes meeting between Secretary of State Rubio and his counterparts. A meeting, by the way, that Denmark and Greenland urgently requested.
At its very heart, this entire conflict is just a raw display of geopolitics in action. It's a textbook case of how a piece of land, simply because of its strategic location in the Arctic, can suddenly become a flashpoint for some really intense international tension and power plays. And all of this leaves us with a really critical question. In this era of assertive foreign policy, where exactly is the line between aggressive deal-making and a direct threat to another nation's sovereignty? The answer to that could have profound implications for America's alliances and really the entire international order.